Hey everybody, Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got a tropical storm that's going to become a hurricane and then a tropical storm again, and a powerhouse winter-like system that are going to move over the Carolinas all on Thursday. And it's going to be a crazy ride as we get Zeta moving in here. Let me show you the wider view just to show you the setup for all this. And I had this looping, but I'm going to stop it just to show you what's going on. Here's our tropical storm Zeta, which is forecast to do this. We've got this low pressure system, and yeah, that's winter weather deep into the heart of Texas and Oklahoma. They've got a winter storm going on there. And look at those temperatures, teens and single digits. And all this is going to combine and move our way. So we got to start with the tropical entity first. Let's go with Tropical Storm Zeta here. You can see it's just now emerging off the Yucatan Peninsula. It's moving back into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the good news here is there is warm water in the southern Gulf of Mexico, but it's very shallow warm water, so it does have the chance to re-intensify. But as it gets up in here, the water is much colder and there's more wind shear. So it's got a short window to gain strength again before it dissipates back down. And I've got the latest forecast track from the Hurricane Center here. We'll start with the track through the Gulf. And you can see it is forecast to become an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane, back up to 85. And then notice the weakening trend as it moves back towards southeast Louisiana. And just depends how quickly that happens. It's likely going to be low-end hurricane, high-end tropical storm. And honestly, the difference in impacts doesn't change. They're both essentially the same, just different verbiage there. Then the track takes it quickly up through northern Georgia by 8 a.m. Thursday, and by Thursday night, it's over areas of Chesapeake Bay as a tropical depression or post-tropical system. And then everyone's noticed how it does become extra tropical, but it gets stronger here. And the reason that is, it's going to merge with that cold front and low pressure system and basically become a nor'easter type system off the East Coast. That's why you're seeing it kind of re-strengthen. It's not technically strengthening as a tropical system, but an extra tropical system. So let's talk about the things that are coming together for us. You can see that low pressure system over Texas, New Mexico, and the desert Southwest. That is pushing this way. Our tropical system is coming up, and they're going to merge somewhere in here. And so that means we're going to get a pretty powerful low pressure system, kind of what you would see in the wintertime anyways, but we're going to have some added tropical moisture moving in with it. And that means the potential for maybe some flash flooding, maybe some wind and severe weather, but one of them has probably got a higher risk than the others, and I'll talk about that. So let's talk about some of the threats this could bring to the Carolinas. First things first, we got to talk about the severe weather threat, which isn't really large. This is a low threat. Yeah, there is a low-end risk of some gusty winds with some isolated storms or an isolated tornado, but overall the severe weather threat's pretty low because we just don't have the amount of instability getting in, and because the orientation of everything, this threat looks low. But I would caution you, stay tuned because this could go up or down. But right now, the severe threat to me is probably the lower threat of all of them. Now, flash flooding also, there's a threat, but not as high as you would expect with this type of setup. In fact, the only real threat, I think, for flash flooding is going to be those southeast-facing slopes in the mountains and foothills, and that's going to be a brief threat because the system is moving so quickly. Now, if the system was moving slower, I think we'd have much bigger issues, but the speed of the system actually keeps the rainfall amounts down. The problem is this area in the mountains and foothills has been clobbered with heavy rain over the last couple of weeks, and that's an area we have to watch for flooding. Now, what are my concerns? I'm going to talk about them here as I kind of lay everything out. All right, so let me show you how everything's unfolding. There's actually, some of this is pretty straightforward. A lot of it is not, but a couple of the things working together here. We know about this low pressure. We know about Zeta, and we've got high pressure off the East Coast. So the flow around that is doing this. This is digging this way and pushing to the east. So this is why the track we know is somewhere in here. But the thing is, how do these two interact? You know, they're going to work together and either form and affect each other. And let's look at how the guidance kind of plays on this. So we'll go into the future here. Whoops, went way too fast there. We'll go slowly. You can see I'm going to go into tomorrow afternoon, into the evening. And you can see here's our low pressure and here's a Zeta making landfall sometime Wednesday evening into the overnight hours. We go into early on Thursday, and you notice they start to merge in some sense. This is obviously Zeta, but you can see the bigger low pressure system, and that's a pretty strong low pressure system. So I'd expect some breezy conditions because you got high pressure here, and so that flow of air is going to make it windy regardless. So we are going to see windy conditions, and to me, wind might be our biggest issue with this system, honestly, because I do expect it to be breezy. And it's not so much because of the tropical system. It's the fact that this is such a big low pressure system, and this is high pressure off the East Coast, provide what we call pressure gradient. So if you've ever stuck your finger over the end of a hose and squirted the water out farther, this happens in the atmosphere. When you have a low pressure and high pressure squeezing the air between them, it causes the air to flow faster, and that creates wind. And so that's what's going on. That pressure gradient is causing a lot of wind overs. Now, as we go into Wednesday or Thursday morning, this is 8 a.m. Thursday morning, you can see the heaviest rain staying mainly in the mountains and foothills. Now, this is a pretty heavy rain setup, but because it's moving so quickly, that heavy rain is in and out quickly. So if we're going to see flash flooding, I do believe it's going to be early on Thursday into the afternoon hours. And you can see it, this is basically by noon on Thursday, the heavy rain is over the mountains. By 2 o'clock, it starts pushing out. By 5 o'clock, it's up near D.C. But we still got this trailing cold front here, which is likely going to bring rain. So for the Panthers game, the good news is the heaviest rain's to our west and likely early in the day. I do think there'll be rain on Thursday night, but it's likely going to be scattered and more light than you probably anticipate, because here we are at 8 p.m. Thursday night. There is light rain over the Carolinas, and then it's gone. By Friday morning, you're going to wake up and it's going to be chilly and sunny. So it's a very narrow window of heavy rain and wind. Now let's talk about that wind. I'm going to throw on the surface wind here. Let me pop them up here. I'm going to put on the 10-meter winds. And you can see it's in purple. Now the scale's on the left. The purple wind area is like 30 to 35 knots. So maybe 40 mile per hour winds. We'll go into Thursday. So this is Thursday afternoon. You can see the winds are pretty strong here. There's a pretty gusty area of winds coming right across the heart of the area. And again, if you look over on the scale here, that's about 35 knots. So 40, 45 mile an hour winds, certainly now the realm of possibility. And very breezy throughout the day. Those winds will push out pretty quickly, and then they're gone. So that's my biggest concern right now. Let's look at the 850 millibar winds, which are just off the surface. This is at 5,000 feet. And just to show you, those winds are pretty strong just off the surface. So any rainfall starts bringing stronger winds down. So there is a window of very strong winds that could pass over the Carolinas on Thursday afternoon. It's in and out pretty quickly, but again, that's a threat we have to watch. So let's talk about the wind and rain overall. Here's the max wind gusts right now through 8 p.m. on Thursday. Most of the gusts across our area, and I'll zoom in closer, are around 30 to 35 miles per hour. But I think that could be higher with this setup. So I really think wind will be the bigger concern with this. Now, rainfall-wise, let me move this over so you can see a little better. You can see the rainfall gradient, we call it. Heaviest rain is here in the mountains. This is about 2 to 4 inches, but you get closer to the Charlotte area and east, the rainfall amounts really taper off. So this primarily looks like the mountains and foothills will see the highest risk for flash flooding, also the highest risk for wind, so we're probably going to see some trees come down. So I would think if we're going to have a problem, it's going to be as this passes over on Thursday morning, potentially with some heavy rain and wind that could bring trees down in the mountains and foothills. But even in the Piedmont, the winds will be very gusty. Now, severe weather-wise, one of the things I look at is the relative velocity. There's a lot of shear with this, but there's not a lot of what we call cape. This is the thunderstorm fuel. There just isn't much over us. The highest is actually over us as the cold front comes through, more so than Zeta. By that time, the winds aren't as favorable for rotating storms. So while I think there's potential for an isolated severe storm, I'm looking at updraft helicity here. There just isn't a lot there for severe weather. So when I was showing these graphics earlier, I think the flash flood threat is our biggest threat, even though there is a low-end risk for severe storms. So, of course, we'll be covering this over the next day and a half, but Thursday's the day, really early in the day primarily, and it's going to be wind, rain, and maybe an isolated severe storm, but it's in and out quickly. By Friday, everything's long gone, and the weekend looks amazing.